Come on in. Welcome back into the classroom. That's right, Dominion Over Finances is back in session for this week. I must tell you, I have enjoyed the last few classes that we have done, dealing with emotions, talking about the mind. And so on today, I want to continue and really wrap up these last few sessions in dealing with the mind and in dealing with the emotions and continuing to develop ourselves and really increasing our capacity in our mind. And when we increase the capacity of our mind, we also increase our capability. So that's what I want to talk to you about on today. I want to talk to you about specifically this. When you change your mind, when you shift your mindset, you increase your capacity and you increase your capability. And increasing them and in changing and shifting your mind, you unlock and you open up your mind to not only increase in what it can contain, but you also increase your power. That is the capability. You increase your power to do and to become and to produce. So let's get into today's session. Last week, we left off about financial success starts in the mind. Financial success starts in the mind. And I wanted to further reiterate why it's important that you begin to really shift your mindset in order for everything else to follow. And so I want to talk to you today. This is not going to come from my own personal experience, but I want to talk to you today from the Bible. And it is one of my favorite biblical stories, and it is the story of Jacob. Specifically, when Jacob leaves his father's house, he goes to his mother's brother's house to find a wife. And in the story, he actually walks away with 2 wives and 12 sons. But we'll get to that in a minute. But this is one of my favorite stories because I like to see the transition and I like to see the change and really the character development that God takes Jacob through. And so I want to walk through that story very quickly, and I want to give you 3 points. You always know I give you some points to ponder and some practical points really of application. And so I want to talk to you from this story on today because I think the story of Jacob and Laban really demonstrates what happens when you shift your mind and you change that mindset, and you are able to both increase your capacity and your capabilities. All right. So in the book of Genesis, chapter 28, we see Jacob. He is blessed by his father. His father gives him instructions to not take wives from the Canaanites and to go unto his family's land. Okay, go to a place that is familiar, find yourself a wife there. He gave him instructions to, go to Laban, which is his mother's brother, and find a wife there. So fast forward through like chapter 28, chapter 29, he meets Rachel. Now after meeting Rachel, he goes to Laban's house. He meets his uncle, they embrace. And at that point, Jacob makes up in his mind that, he was so overwhelmed and overtaken with Rachel's beauty. He wants to take Rachel now as his wife. And I'm paraphrasing the story a little bit, so I encourage you to go and read it. But nevertheless, it is at this point now that Jacob and Laban come into an agreement. And that agreement is that Jacob will work for Rachel. Because he loved Rachel so much and he wants to marry her, he agrees that I will stay and I will work 7 years so that I may have Rachel. Well, as it turns out, Laban, he kind of tricked Jacob, and instead of giving him Rachel, he gave him Leah, which is his eldest daughter first. So Laban gives Jacob Leah in a little bit of a trick and a plot twist. And so as a result of that, Jacob now has to satisfy, or he has already satisfied the 7 years to get whom he thought he was going to get in Rachel. He ends up with Leah. And now he has to work another 7 years in order to actually marry Rachel. Okay, so 14 years now he's with Laban. Over the span of those 14 years, he weds Leah. Leah begins to have children. He has children with Leah's handmaid. He marries Rachel, has children with, and Rachel took some time to conceive. So he has children with Rachel's handmaid first, then Rachel, and then they kind of go back and forth having children. To sum it all up, at the end of this, Jacob has now worked the 14 years. He now has 2 wives in both Leah and Rachel, and he has, I believe at this point, 11 sons. I think at this point, Joseph was the last before leaving Laban. At any rate, we come to a place now where in these 14 years, Jacob begins to make some transitions. And Jacob, in his mind, begins to recognize some things about himself. And so Jacob now confronts Laban and he says, look, and I paraphrase, I've worked for you these 14 years. Because of me, you have been blessed. Let me go so that I may go and begin to build for my family. So how many of us have come to the place where we recognize, you know what, enough's enough. I have worked hard enough for others and have made others blessed and wealthy. Now it is time for me to go out and to do what I need to do for my family so that I can leave an inheritance and so that I can pass on generational wealth to my family. And so that is the point where we see Jacob. And so Laban comes back, Laban being the employer, Jacob being the employee. And Laban comes back and says, yes, I have learned through divination. And I don't want to deal with that part, but that says a lot about Laban. I've learned through divination that because of you, I have been blessed, right? So we as employees, oftentimes we pour out the blessings for the employer and we don't leave what we need to so that we can pass on generational wealth to our offspring. But Jacob comes to this point where he recognizes, I can't pour out all of my talents here with you. I can't continue to gift and to be a blessing to you, and I'm not a blessing to my family. That, my friends, is a lesson unto itself. How often do we take the wages that we have earned and rather than building for generations to come, it somehow, some way has been squandered. And I know squandered may be a harsh word. It somehow, some way may have been mismanaged. But I'm telling you, if you change your mind, you can change the capacity and your capability to change all of that. And so Laban now comes back and he says, recognizing that there is a change and a shift in Jacob, he says, name your wages. And Jacob responds, for this, you can't pay me a wage. Because now what has happened in Jacob? Jacob recognizes his value. And in recognizing his value, he recognizes his worth. So that, my friends, is point number 1. When you shift your mindset, When now you can begin to recognize that my financial success, your financial success starts here in the mind. It starts here when you make the appropriate shifts. You recognize your value, and consequently you recognize your worth. And that is where Jacob was. Jacob recognized his worth, and he recognized that in shifting his mind, he recognized that where Laban was could no longer hold Laban and his flock and family, as well as his wives, and his children. You recognize your worth. You recognize your value, you recognize your worth, you begin to make the appropriate changes to get into a place that can receive and can hold you. That's important, because Jacob recognized, because I have made these shifts, because I have grown, not just in my family, but I've grown here and I've expanded here. Laban, I recognize you no longer have the capacity to hold me here. And so Jacob comes back and he says to Laban, look, those wages that they're, you can tell me as much as you want to, name your wages. But what you can give me cannot hold me. What you can give me is not enough. But I will tell you this. This is the agreement that Jacob made. Jacob made an agreement with Laban to take what appeared to be the things, the flock, the sheep, I believe it was sheep and cattle, but don't quote me on that. He took the speckled, the spotted, and the brown flock, the speckled, the spotted, and the brown of Laban's flock. He agreed, I will take those. If you give me those, I will take those. I will separate them from your flock. Your flock I will continue to tend to, and it will continue to be blessed and continue to grow. All the while, I will take these, and these will become my own flock. Okay? So here you see the separation, okay, between what Laban has now and what he is now given to Jacob. And it's interesting. After Jacob has begun to make this transition, he now recognizes his value. He now recognizes the worth that he has been to Laban, and he makes it up in his mind that I will no longer solely be worthy to just Laban, but I now have to be worthy and of some worth to my own family and to the generations that come behind me. So now there's another shift. And that's my point number 2. When you make the appropriate changes in your mind, when you make up in your mind that, hey, financial success, it starts with me, but it starts with the change up here, you begin to shift from being a consumer and adopting the lifestyle of consumerism, and you shift into production. That means you have to produce. You are no longer satisfied with just consuming, but you recognize now with the shift in your mind that it is time for me to produce. And that's where Laban was. So Laban says, guess what? Because I recognize my value, because I recognize the worth, because now Jacob recognizes I've been operating underneath my privilege, because the covenantal blessings of my grandfather Abraham, it rests upon my life. Therein is another shift in his mindset. Because of that, I can no longer use that just to bless Laban, but now I have to use it to bless my own. And when God sees that Jacob now has made that shift in his mind, he gave Jacob what I like to call prophetic intelligence. He gave Jacob a plan. And Jacob took what was spotted, what was speckled, what was brown, what seemed to have some kind of abnormalities. Okay, he was able to take that, and he was able to cause that flock to grow and to produce and to breed. Okay, And it was interesting when I looked at the components of I like to call it a formula that God gave to Jacob. And it was made up of almond, poplar, and plain wood. Almond, poplar, and plain wood. The almond piece, though, it really sticks out. And the reason the almond piece sticks out is the almond tree is associated with that which hastens. That which hastens, meaning that which is expeditious, right? Meaning that which will cause a burst or breaking forth, okay? You see the almond tree also in the book of Jeremiah, and I can't get into that, but that means that God hastens, and I believe it says it in the book of Jeremiah, that God hastens to perform his word. And so the almond here represents, because Jacob now has made the shift in his mind, he gives Jacob a formula using the almond to hasten, hallelujah, to hasten what needs to happen with this flock. It's God giving you something. It's God giving you a business. It's God giving you instruction. It's God giving you something that he wants to hasten to grow in your life, to not only help you, but to help the generations that follow you. So my friends, we see now, number one, that Jacob has made the shift in recognizing his value and his worth. He has made the shift now in understanding that I can no longer be a consumer. I can no longer just continue to give unto Laban that which was intended to be a part of the covenantal blessings that God had for me. Now he has to shift from consumerism to production. When he makes the shift to begin to produce, God gives him a formula to cause the flock that was speckled and spotted and brown, those things that seemed to be that which was unwanted, that which seemed to have the anomalies. God gives him the formula to cause those things to grow and to breed, and he brings forth an abundance even through that which didn't appear to be able to produce. That's powerful. That is powerful. I hope you are getting what I am trying to drive home on today. And so now Jacob is working this formula, and because of the formula that God had given, because it contained the almond, because it contained that which is caused to hasten because of what the almond represented, now Jacob is at this crossroads. He is at this crossroads. And this is the last point that I want to drive home to you on today. When you make the appropriate shift in your mind, when you make the appropriate shift in your mind, when you unlock both your capacity, that is the ability, the function to contain, when you unlock and increase your capability in the shifting of your mind, you increase your power to produce. Now you get to the point, you get to the fork in the road where there's a separation of being the employed and the deployed. Now look, I'm telling you, I'm not telling you to leave your job. I'm not telling you to leave your place of employment. But I believe that we are shifting in a time and in an age where we just cannot stop at being the employee. There are many of you that are listening to me on tonight that God has given you the formula to be the employer. He has given you the formula that contains the almond, which will hasten your ability to become the employer, to become the one which is now deployed. See, the employed, it is contained. You see, when Jacob was an employee, he was contained within what Laban himself had the capacity to do. But when you are deployed, you unlock now. It enlarges the boundaries. It expands your territory by which you can go out and produce. I hope you are hearing me on today. So I'm telling you, those of you who know right here in your heart that God has given you the formula, God has contained within that formula the almond. He is contained within that formula the particular substance, the particular molecule, the particular thing that will cause the plan for you to shift from employee to the deployed, to go out and to produce. You got to do it. You have to do it. I pray that this word will be confirmation for that. So let me wrap this up, my friends. When you shift your mindset, you unlock your capacity. You unlock the capability. You give room. There it is. You give room. That's why the scripture says, my gift will make room. You give room when you shift your mind. You give room when you understand that you have value and you have worth. That's number one. You give room and you unlock your ability to increase in capacity and the power, that is the capability to produce. When you shift from being a consumer to being a producer, that's number two. And then the last point to drive home is that when you make these appropriate shifts in your mind, you will now understand that it is not just about being the employed, but now you recognize that it is your assignment to be deployed in the earth. That is number three. My friends, you want to unlock. In fact, as God's people, as his kingdom citizens, we have been given the keys. You have been given the keys to unlock the power. That is the capability. You have the power. You have the keys to unlock your ability to contain what God has given for you. That is the capacity. But you gotta shift in your mind. That is where it begins. You have to make the shift in your mind. You have to recognize your value and your worth. You have to shift from being a consumer into being a producer. And you have to recognize that it is no longer about being just employed, but God is calling you to be deployed in the earth. So I hope this has been a blessing for you. This class will wrap up. It will wrap up our mind series. I hope you have enjoyed it. I hope it has been a blessing to you. And I want to make this special announcement that we are transitioning out of the month of February and into the month of March. And in March, I want to begin to pivot just a little bit. And I want to start talking to you about some of the mechanics, some of the practical tools that you need to employ when you are going through and working through your finances. And so for the month of March, we're going to be working on those mechanics. I won't unveil them to you just now or today, but I just want to give you that warning that we're going to pivot a little bit and we're going to work on those mechanics because you need those practical tools as you go along, as you're making those shifts in your mindset, as you are, changing your thought processes, as you are learning to increase your capacity and your capability. Now you need the practical tools to go along with that and to accompany those changes. All right. So the month of March, we'll talk about the mechanics and we will see where God takes us in the month of March and then on to the month of April. Again, I want to thank you for joining me on tonight. I hope it has been a blessing to you. And I hope that I will see you here next week. Thank you and be blessed.
That's right, Dominion Over Finances is back in session for this week. Emotions, talking about the mind. Well, as it turns out, Laban, he kind of tricked Jacob, and instead of giving him Rachel, he gave him Leah, which is his eldest daughter first.